The smell of bleach still lingers in the Magnolia House's basement, decades after anyone was supposed to have cleaned it. For years, guests passed through its rooms, praising the charm, the history, the warmth of the late Miss Evelyn. But now the house is empty, the air thick with secrets, until a young journalist steps inside with a recorder, not knowing the floorboards hold more than dust. When a historic black-owned bed and breakfast in rural Mississippi is put up for sale after its owner's death, journalist Naomi Cole sets out to write a feel-good piece about black Southern heritage. But what begins as a nostalgic feature turns sinister when Naomi discovers evidence of missing women from the 1980s hidden beneath the house. As she digs deeper, she uncovers generational silence, local complicity, and the horrifying truth that the killer might have been the person the town revered most, a man who still has powerful friends. The investigation drags Naomi into a dangerous game of cat and mouse with someone who will do anything to keep the past buried. Before we get into the case file, just a quick note. If stories of hidden motives, dead ends, and unexpected turns are your thing, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell so the next mystery finds you first. Now, let's open the file. The July heat pressed heavy against Naomi's car as she pulled into a gravel driveway lined with sagging magnolia trees. Their leaves were dark and waxy, shadows stretching across the dirt like old scars. The house sat at the end, a 2-story white structure with weathered shutters and a porch that had seen better decades. Magnolia House. Naomi killed the engine and wiped sweat from her forehead. The email from her editor replayed in her mind. Heritage feature. Positive vibes. We need something that sells nostalgia, not nightmares. She sighed, glancing at the for sale sign nailed crooked near the mailbox. For 70 years, Magnolia House had been the pride of Colfax County, a place black travelers came when they couldn't stay anywhere else. Her own grandmother had told her stories about it. Safe beds in a dangerous time, she used to say. But looking at it now, Naomi felt no safety. Only the hum of cicadas and something heavier, something she couldn't name. She stepped out, her sandals crunching on gravel. The air smelled faintly sweet, like magnolia blossoms, but under it was something else stale, sour, like damp wood. A man in a sweat-stained button-up appeared from the porch, his posture stiff. "You Naomi Cole?" "Yes, sir," she said, tucking her press badge back into her tote. "I'm Henry Barnes, realtor." He offered a hand that felt dry and calloused, his smile tight. "Place has history, you know. Folks come from all over just to see it." "That's what I'm here for," Naomi replied, flipping open her small leather notebook. "I'm doing a piece on Southern landmarks. Places like this. They matter." Henry's eyes darted to the house, then back to her. "Well, folks say that, but some history's better left behind." Naomi gave a polite laugh, unsure if it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. They walked up the porch steps, boards creaking like whispers. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and dust. The foyer walls were lined with sepia-toned photos, smiling families, soldiers, church ladies in wide-brimmed hats. History, captured and framed. Henry gestured toward the parlor. "Miss Evelyn kept this place like a museum. After she passed last winter, well, no one's touched a thing." Naomi nodded, recording the details in her mind, the faded floral couch, the upright piano, the lace curtains yellowing with time. She imagined the story now. Magnolia House, the beating heart of Colfax history. She wandered through the kitchen, snapping photos with her phone. That's when she saw the door. It was small, set low into the wall near the pantry, with a brass knob dulled by age. "What's down there?" she asked. Henry hesitated. "Basement. Just storage. You don't need to." But Naomi was already crouching, tugging the door open. A wave of cool, damp air met her face. The wooden steps disappeared into shadows. "I'd like to take a look," she said. Henry sighed, muttering something under his breath, but he didn't stop her. Naomi clicked on her phone's flashlight and started.
If you value your life, you'll put that box back where you found it.
Down. The light bounced across bare concrete walls, revealing shelves of mason jars, a rusted washtub, old suitcases stacked in a corner. She exhaled, ready to turn back, until the beam caught something metallic. A lockbox. It sat on the ground near the far wall, streaked with rust. Naomi knelt, brushing away dust. There were scratches around the latch, like someone had tried to pry it open years ago and failed. Her pulse quickened. She glanced up at Henry, who hovered at the top of the stairs, face unreadable. "Mind if I take this upstairs?" she asked. "Wouldn't bother," he said flatly. "Ain't nothing in there but junk." But his voice carried something else, tightness, maybe fear. Naomi smiled politely, masking her own racing thoughts, and lifted the box. It was heavier than it looked. As she climbed the stairs, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside wasn't junk at all, and that Henry Barnes didn't want her to open it. Naomi sat at the old dining table, the lockbox resting before her like a relic from a forgotten war. Its rusted surface flaked under her fingertips, leaving faint orange smears on her skin. The air inside Magnolia House felt heavier now, the July heat pressing against the walls, even though the ceiling fans turned lazy circles above. Henry leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "Like I said, it's probably empty. Miss Evelyn kept a lot of nonsense down there." Naomi looked up, meeting his gaze. "Mind if I check?" He shrugged, but his jaw tightened. "Do what you want. Just don't break nothing. Place still gotta sell." She pulled a small multi-tool from her tote, a habit from years of covering protests, where you never knew what you might need, and slipped the flat edge into the lock. The old latch gave after a few nudges, creaking open with a reluctant groan. Inside, she found no stacks of money, no shiny jewelry. Instead, the smell hit first, faint, sour, like something had been sealed away too long. There were photographs dozens, curled and yellowed. Naomi pulled the first one free, brushing dust from its surface. It was a woman, smiling, standing in front of a red Chevy with Mississippi plates. The year stamped in the corner read 1984. She flipped through more. Different women, different cars, same pose, same bright smile. But there was something else in every photo. Each woman wore a small silver cross on a thin chain. "What the hell?" Naomi murmured, her pulse ticking faster. Beneath the photos lay a strip of newspaper clippings. Headlines leapt out like whispers from the past. "Local woman vanishes on Highway 82. Search called off in disappearance of 19-year-old. 3 women missing in 2 years. Is there a connection?" Naomi's throat tightened. She turned another clipping, saw the name of the reporter. Thomas Riley, a byline she recognized from old archives, long before her time. At the bottom of the box was a small, tarnished chain. She lifted it by the tips of her fingers, a silver cross, just like the ones in the photos. Henry cleared his throat behind her. "Like I said, junk." Naomi looked up sharply. His face was calm, but his eyes, there was something restless behind them. "Who were these women?" she asked. He shrugged. "Don't know. Probably friends of Miss Evelyn. Guests, maybe. Folks passed through here all the time." Naomi studied him for a beat longer before sliding the items back into the box. Her instincts screamed that this was more than junk. This was a story. A dangerous one. "I'd like to hang on to these for a bit," she said lightly, trying to sound casual. Henry's jaw ticked. "Suit yourself." But don't go stirring up old ghosts. People around here, they don't take kindly to that. The warning clung to the air like humidity as Naomi carried the box to her car. She stowed it carefully in the trunk, her mind racing. Missing women, cross necklaces, newspaper clippings dating back 40 years. And why the hell would Miss Evelyn, beloved pillar of the community, have kept all this? Naomi slid behind the wheel and gripped the steering wheel tight. She told herself she'd just write the heritage piece, like her editor wanted. No deep dives, no trouble. But as she drove past the church where Miss Evelyn's funeral banner still hung, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered. "Hello?" A man's voice, gravelly low. "Miss Cole, if you value your life, you'll put that box back where you found it." The line went dead. Naomi's stomach dropped. Her hands were slick against the steering wheel. And for the first time since she arrived in Colfax County, she wondered if she'd just walked into something that wouldn't let her walk out. The road out of Magnolia House curved through miles of pine trees, their tall shadows stretching across the cracked asphalt. Naomi's phone sat on the passenger seat, dark and silent now, but the man's voice still echoed in her ears. "If you value your life." She tightened her grip on the wheel, scanning the rearview mirror. Nothing but empty road. Still, her pulse beat in her throat like a drum. By the time she reached her motel, a squat brick building with flickering neon, her shirt clung damp against her back. She parked under the buzzing light and sat there for a moment, staring at the lockbox in the trunk. Every instinct screamed to call her editor and back out. But then she pictured those women in the photos, smiling for a camera that would outlive them. Someone had kept their faces locked away for decades. Someone wanted that silence to last. She wasn't built for silence. Naomi hauled the box into her room, setting it on the table by the window. The curtains smelled like cigarette smoke and mildew, but she barely noticed. She spread out the photos, lining them up like puzzle pieces. 8 women, different hair, different skin tones, different lives. But the same bright smiles, the same silver cross glinting on their chests. The backgrounds gave her clues: old gas stations, country roads, the kind of places where no one asked questions. She opened her laptop and searched the headlines from the clippings. The first missing woman, Angela Hayes, age 23, disappeared July 1984. Last seen leaving a diner off Highway 82 after her shift. No leads, no suspects. The article quoted her mother. Angela didn't just walk away. Somebody took her. Naomi typed the name into the state archives. A grainy photo appeared: Angela, grinning in front of a jukebox, the same smile from the lockbox photo. Naomi's stomach knotted. 7 more names to find. 7 more ghosts waiting for someone to speak for them. She dug deeper, scrolling through old PDFs until her eyes burned. And then, there it was, a name that made her freeze. Deborah Lee, missing, 1986. The article mentioned she worked part-time at Magnolia House as a housekeeper. Naomi leaned back, her breath catching. The connection was real now, not random, not coincidence. The room felt smaller suddenly, the hum of the AC too loud. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number from the old article's byline. Thomas Riley, the reporter who wrote about the missing women back in the 80s. 3 rings. 4. Then a tired male voice answered, "Hello, Mr. Riley? This is Naomi Cole. I'm a journalist. I'm looking into the disappearances of—" "Stop." His voice sharpened, cutting her off. "Who told you to call me?" "No one. You're in Colfax, ain't you?" "Yes, Then listen good. Leave. Tonight. Don't talk to nobody else. Don't ask no more questions." The line clicked dead. Naomi lowered the phone slowly, her chest tight. 2 calls in one day telling her to walk away. That wasn't coincidence either. A low rumble outside made her glance through the blinds. Headlights swept across the parking lot, pausing on her window. Her pulse kicked into overdrive as a dark sedan idled under the streetlight. She could feel eyes behind that windshield. Then, just as slow, it rolled away, disappearing into the night. Naomi's hands trembled as she pulled the curtains shut. Her heart thudded against her ribs, but beneath the fear was something else, anger. Whoever these women were, they deserved more than whispers and warnings. She snapped another photo of the lockbox contents, uploading them to the cloud. If anyone thought they could scare her off, they didn't know Naomi Cole. But as she lay in bed, staring at the stained ceiling tiles, one thought wouldn't let go. If Miss Evelyn knew, did she keep their secrets, or someone else's? Outside, the pine trees rustled like they were gossiping in the dark. And in her dreams, Naomi saw silver crosses shining like stars in the dirt. The next morning broke with a haze of golden light sliding through the grimy motel curtains. Naomi had barely slept. Every sound outside, every engine, every door slam kept her half awake, waiting for another set of headlights to stop in front of her room. She dressed in a plain t-shirt and jeans, tucking her press badge deep into her tote. Her laptop sat open on the table, screen dark, but the photos from last night were still burned in her mind. 8 women, 8 silver crosses. And the name that changed everything. Deborah Lee, tied to Magnolia House. She needed answers, and she knew where to start. In small towns like Colfax, the diner was the pulse. The Bluebird Diner. The bell over the door chimed as Naomi stepped into the Bluebird. It smelled of bacon grease and old coffee, the kind of place where time barely moves. Booths were packed with locals in faded ball caps and church hats, the low murmur of conversation rising and falling like cicadas. She slid into a booth by the window. A waitress with kind eyes and tired feet came over, balancing a pot of coffee. "What can I get you, sugar?" "Just coffee, thanks," Naomi said, offering a smile. The waitress poured her a cup, then paused, studying her face like trying to place her. "You're not from around here." "No, ma'am. Just doing a piece on local history. Magnolia House." That got a few heads turning. Conversations dipped, then picked up again. Quieter this time. The waitress' smile thinned. "Lot of history in that place," she said carefully. "You one of them magazine folks?" "Something like that." Naomi sipped her coffee, scanning the room. An older man sat alone at the counter, nursing a biscuit and black coffee. His skin was weathered like old leather, and his eyes, sharp, watchful, kept flicking her way. When the waitress moved off, Naomi gathered her courage and approached him. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Mind if I sit?" He shrugged, gesturing to the stool beside him. "Name's Naomi," she offered. "I know who you are," he said, voice gravelly, like rocks tumbling in a tin can. "Word travels fast here." "You worked at Magnolia House?" she asked. A bitter smile tugged at his lips. "Worked everywhere back then. Painted walls, fixed roofs. Folks called me Handy Sam." He took a slow sip of coffee. "What you want to know?" Naomi hesitated, then leaned in. "Miss Evelyn's husband. Earl?" "What kind of man was he?" Sam chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Earl Carter? That man had 2 faces, one for church and Sunday socials, one for the road." "The road?" "He drove trucks, long hauls, they said. Gone for days, weeks sometimes. Folks stopped asking questions after a while. That's how it was back then. Black folks mind their business, stay out of trouble." Naomi felt a prickle crawl up her spine. Did anyone ever suspect him when those women went missing? Sam's jaw tightened. His voice dropped low. "Suspect? Sure. But you think the sheriff was going to lock up Earl Carter? Man had friends in high places. Deacons, businessmen, even white folks on the county board. People worshipped him because he kept the money flowing." Naomi's pulse thudded. You think he did it? Sam finally turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something raw fear, but also the weight of years carrying something heavy. I think you asking the kind of questions that get people killed. He tossed a few bills on the counter and slid off the stool. Before walking out, he leaned close, his breath smelling faintly of tobacco. Word of advice, Miss Reporter. Earl's been dead 20 years, but the people who protected him, they still breathing. Then he was gone, the bell over the door chiming soft behind him. The tale. Naomi sat frozen for a beat, heart hammering, Sam's warning replaying in her head. Earl Carter, Miss Evelyn's husband. Gone 2 decades, but his shadow stretched long. She left cash for the coffee and stepped out into the heat, the sun glaring white across the blacktop. Her car baked in the lot like an oven. She unlocked it and slid in fast, locking the doors before starting the engine. As she pulled out, she checked the rear view. The street shimmered in the distance empty, except for a black SUV parked 2 spaces down from the diner. Windows tinted dark. Her stomach knotted. She eased onto the road, trying to keep her speed steady. A glance in the mirror made her blood run cold. The SUV pulled out, slow and smooth, falling in behind her. Naomi's grip tightened on the wheel. She turned left at the next corner, heart pounding. The SUV turned too. Another turn. Same result. This wasn't paranoia. She was being followed. Naomi's mind raced. The motel was out too obvious. She spotted a dirt road ahead, half hidden by weeds, and swung into it, tires crunching gravel. The SUV slowed at the turnoff, then kept going. Naomi waited until its taillights disappeared before exhaling a shaky breath. Her hands trembled against the wheel. Whoever was watching her wanted her to know it. She sat there for a long moment, the smell of dust thick in her nose, before pulling back onto the main road. If Earl Carter was dead, someone else was keeping his secrets alive. And Naomi had just made their list. The Colfax County Courthouse squatted like an old sentinel on the edge of town, its brick walls faded and its steps worn smooth by decades of boots and Sunday shoes. Naomi climbed them 2 at a time, the July heat slicking her skin, her mind still humming from the tale she'd shaken. Inside, the air was cool and faintly metallic, carrying the scent of old paper and floor polish. She found the records office in the basement, a low-ceilinged room lined with metal cabinets and cardboard boxes, stacked like forgotten tombstones. An older woman sat behind the counter, her hair in tight silver curls, glasses perched low on her nose. Her name tag read, Mrs. Tillman. "Can I help you?" Mrs. Tillman asked, peering over her bifocals. "I hope so," Naomi said, setting her press badge on the counter for credibility. "I'm researching historical figures from Colfax, Earl Carter. He was married to Evelyn Carter-owned Magnolia House back in the day." Mrs. Tillman's eyes flickered with something recognition, maybe hesitation before she rose slowly and shuffled toward the back. "We got old tax filings, property deeds." "Might take me a while," she said, disappearing between the stacks. Naomi glanced around, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Every second felt like someone could walk in and watch her. Mrs. Tillman returned with a slim folder and laid it on the counter. "That's all I got. You didn't hear it from me." Naomi thanked her and retreated to a corner desk, flipping the file open. Inside were property records from the 70s and 80s. Magnolia House listed under Earl Carter's name. Then came a surprise deed transfer in 1992, the year Earl died. Everything moved to Evelyn. But Naomi's eyes snagged on something else, an insurance payout form dated 3 months after his death. Amount $250,000. Beneficiary Evelyn Carter. The note in the margin read, "Policy triggered by accidental death. Cause, vehicular crash, Highway 18. Naomi frowned. A man like Earl, with money and power, taken out by a car accident? Something about that sat wrong. She dug deeper into the folder and found a scanned obituary short, vague, listing Earl as a pillar of the community. No mention of where he was headed, why he was on that road. She jotted notes fast, her mind spinning. Earl dies in 92. Evelyn inherits everything and keeps Magnolia House running for nearly 30 years. But why keep a lockbox full of missing women's photos? Guilt or protection? Naomi slipped the folder back to Mrs. Tillman, thanked her, and stepped into the blinding heat outside. The courthouse steps felt steeper now, her pulse loud in her ears. Her car sat alone in the lot. For a second, relief washed over her, until she saw the scrap of paper tucked under her wiper. She froze, the sun beating down on her back as she reached for it. The note was written in blocky letters, all caps, black ink bleeding into the paper fibers. Stop digging. Next time I tea won't be a warning. Her breath caught. A chill rolled through her despite the heat. She scanned the lot empty. No cameras, no witnesses. Naomi slid into the driver's seat, hands trembling as she locked the doors. The paper lay on the passenger seat like a live wire. For a long moment, she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to cry or scream. Instead, she reached for her phone and snapped a picture of the note, uploading it to the cloud like she did with the photos. If something happened to her, someone would know. Then she started the engine, her jaw tight, and pulled out of the lot. They wanted her scared, wanted her to quit. But Naomi had a name now, a timeline, and a gut-deep certainty that this wasn't just about Earl Carter. It was about everyone who kept their mouths shut to protect him. And she wasn't going to shut up. Sunday morning in Colfax carried its own rhythm church bells ringing through the muggy air, hymnals floating over cracked sidewalks, families in pastel suits moving like a river toward salvation. Naomi hadn't stepped inside a church in years, but Magnolia Baptist wasn't just a sanctuary. It was Evelyn Carter's fortress. The parking lot shimmered with heat as Naomi pulled in, feeling every eye follow her car. She parked near the edge, killed the engine, and reached for her notebook. The threatening note still sat folded in her tote like a ticking bomb, but she pushed it aside and stepped out, forcing a smile when a woman in a flowered hat gave her a curious once-over. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of lemon oil and old hymnals. Stained glass filtered the sunlight into soft blues and reds. Naomi slid into the last pew as the choir launched into a soulful rendition of "His Eye is on the Sparrow." She scanned the room, her gaze landing on a man in his late 70s, seated near the pulpit, a tall figure with silver hair, his suit pressed sharp despite the heat. The deacon, Walter Sims. His name had popped up in 2 old articles about Magnolia House fundraisers back in the 80s. When the benediction ended and the crowd spilled into the aisle, Naomi slipped forward, waiting for her chance. Sims lingered near the altar, chatting with parishioners. Up close, his eyes were sharp, bright as glass marbles, the kind that missed nothing. "Deacon Sims?" Naomi said softly, approaching. He turned, his smile warm but measured. "Yes, ma'am?" "I'm Naomi Cole. I'm writing about Magnolia House, its history, Miss Evelyn's legacy. Thought you might have stories." His smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Lord, that house been standing longer than some of these folks been breathing. Evelyn was a saint. Was she?" Naomi asked lightly. "I heard her husband, Earl, was well-loved too." That made him pause. He clasped his hands, lowering his voice. "Earl was complicated." Naomi tilted her head. "Complicated how?" Sims glanced around. The last of the congregation drifted toward the doors, laughter echoing in the hall. He stepped closer, his cologne sharp with spice and age. "Men like Earl had appetites," he said, almost whispering. "Women, liquor, nights on the road. Evelyn bore it all with grace. You think he was unfaithful? Sim's eyes hardened. I think he had ways of making his sins disappear. Naomi's breath hitched. Disappear? The deacon gave her a long look, one that pinned her to the floor. You didn't hear that from me. And if you're smart, Miss Cole, you'll leave it right there. Before she could press, he turned and strode toward the vestibule, his polished shoes clicking like a gavel on marble. The break-in. The air outside felt heavier, pressing against Naomi's skin as she walked back to her car. Sim's words gnawed at her, making his sins disappear. Did Evelyn know? Had she spent decades living under the shadow of those sins or cleaning them up? She drove back to the motel with the windows down, trying to clear the fog of unease from her head. The parking lot was half empty when she pulled in, sun glaring off windshields like watchful eyes. Something felt off the moment she stepped out. Her door was closed, but the curtain inside stirred faintly, as if someone had been there. Naomi's pulse spiked. She dug for her key, slipped it into the lock, and pushed the door open. The room smelled wrong. Not just the stale air of a cheap motel, something sharper, like cologne and sweat. Her tote was on the bed, spilled open. Papers scattered. The lockbox gone. Naomi's breath came hard and shallow. She checked the drawers, the closet empty. Whoever broke in had taken only the box and left everything else. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and snapped photos of the mess. Then she called the front desk, voice shaking. Did anyone see someone near room 8? Not that I know of, the clerk said, bored, as if break-ins were just weather here. You want me to call the sheriff? Naomi froze. The sheriff. If Sims was right about Earl's friends in high places, she couldn't trust local law enforcement. No, she said quickly. I'll handle it. She ended the call and sank onto the edge of the bed, her heart pounding so loud it filled the silence. The box was gone. Everything that tied Magnolia House to those missing women was in someone else's hands now, and whoever had taken it knew where she slept. For the first time since she arrived in Colfax, Naomi wasn't sure if she'd make it out. The motel room felt smaller now, like the walls were inching closer with every breath Naomi took. The lockbox was gone, and with it, her only tangible proof of what Magnolia House might be hiding. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a calendar reminder for a deadline that suddenly felt irrelevant. She silenced it and opened her laptop, pushing through the fog of fear. If they thought taking the box would stop her, they underestimated her. She opened the state archives again, fingers flying over the keys. Earl Carter, trucking, highway routes. She scrolled through brittle old clippings, scanning headlines until one caught her eye. Local business leader expands freight company. Dateline, July 1983. Photo, Earl Carter, beaming beside a semi-truck, the Magnolia House sign visible in the background. Naomi's gut tightened. So Earl wasn't just a traveling man, he owned the trucks. She dug deeper, finding company records under Carter Freight and Hauling, operating through the mid-'80s South until it dissolved 2 years after his death. Her mind reeled. The missing women each last seen along rural highways. Earl's trucks had run those routes. Was he picking them up? Bringing them back? She clicked another clipping and froze. A Magnolia House charity gala, dated 1986. Smiling faces in formal wear filled the frame, and there, at the edge, barely visible, was a young woman in a blue dress. Naomi leaned closer, her stomach flipping as recognition hit. It was the same woman from one of the lockbox photos. Same bright smile. Same silver cross. Naomi's pulse roared in her ears. That girl wasn't some random stranger off a highway. She had been inside Magnolia House, dressed up, mingling with the town's elite. A sudden sound snapped Naomi's head up, a soft whisper against the carpet. Her eyes darted to the door just in time to see an envelope sliding under it. Every nerve in her body screamed as she stared at the thin white rectangle lying there like a venomous snake. She moved slowly, each step heavy, and crouched to pick it up. The paper was cool against her fingers, the flap sealed. No name, no return address. She tore it open, breath shallow. Inside was a single photograph. Naomi felt her blood turn to ice. It was her, sitting in the Bluebird Diner that morning, coffee cup in hand. The angle was over her shoulder, like the photographer had been just a few feet away. On the back, scrawled in the same blocky letters as the note on her windshield, "Next time we won't just take the box." Naomi's hands shook so hard the photo slipped to the floor. Her lungs struggled to pull in air as panic clawed at her ribs. Someone had been close enough to take this picture without her even knowing, watching her, following her. She stumbled to the window and yanked the curtain aside. The parking lot shimmered in the late sun, empty except for a couple of dusty pickups. No SUV, no sign of anyone. Naomi backed away from the glass, heart slamming. Whoever they were, they wanted her terrified. And it was working. Her phone buzzed again, a text this time, from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "We see you, Naomi." She dropped the phone like it burned, her breath coming in jagged bursts. For a split second, the thought crossed her mind. Pack your things, get out, forget all of it. But then she pictured those 8 women again, smiling in their photos, frozen in time while the world forgot them. And she knew she couldn't run. Whoever was coming for her wasn't just protecting Earl Carter's memory. They were protecting themselves. Naomi grabbed her keys and her laptop, shoving them into her tote. If they were watching, fine. Let them watch. She wasn't done yet. As she locked the door behind her, the air felt thick, charged, like a storm was about to break. And Naomi Cole walked straight into it. The highway stretched long and empty beneath a sky heavy with late afternoon clouds. Naomi's hands gripped the wheel tight, her toque riding shotgun like a nervous passenger. She kept checking the mirror, scanning for the black SUV, but the road behind her stayed quiet. Too quiet. Jackson was 90 miles from Colfax, far enough, she hoped, to shake any tails. Far enough to dig without every set of eyes knowing her business. By the time the city skyline appeared, dusk had draped itself over the buildings. Naomi pulled into a library with glowing glass doors and headed straight for the archives. Her chest loosened a fraction when she stepped inside, the cool air wrapping around her like armor. She gave the librarian her credentials and requested court filings tied to Carter freight and hauling. It took nearly 40 minutes for the files to appear on a rolling cart, the cardboard boxes smelling faintly of dust and mildew. Naomi wheeled them to a corner table and dove in. The first box held business licenses and shipping manifests. Dozens of invoices stamped paid, names of contractors. Highway routes stretching across Mississippi and into Louisiana. She flipped page after page until a court docket number snagged her attention. State of Mississippi v. Carter Freight, 1989. Her pulse jumped. She skimmed the complaint. Alleged safety violations, unlicensed drivers. Buried in the legal jargon was a name: Raymond Pierce, former driver, fired after an incident in 1988. Naomi scribbled it down, digging for more. The deposition transcripts were thin, most sealed. But one line stood out in Pierce's testimony before the court cut it off. Things Earl made us do, things no decent man should. The rest was blacked out. Naomi snapped photos of every page before packing up. When she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. A voicemail from an unknown number. She played it, the voice low and strained. "You don't know me, but I knew Earl. Meet me tonight, 8 p.m., Carter's old truck yard. I'll tell you what really happened." Then the click of a hang-up. Naomi stared at the phone, her pulse hammering. It could be a trap. Every instinct screamed it was a trap. But if this Raymond Pierce was still alive and talking, She couldn't ignore it. The yard. The address led her to the outskirts of Jackson, where weeds split the concrete and rusted trailers sat like forgotten bones. The truck yard loomed dark and hollow, chain-link fence sagging under the weight of years. Naomi parked her car outside the gate and slipped through a gap, heart pounding so loud drowned the chirp of crickets. The air smelled of oil and rain-soaked dirt. Floodlights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across a row of decaying semis. "Hello?" She called softly, her voice swallowed by the open dark. "Mr. Pierce?" A figure stepped from behind a trailer, a tall man in a frayed denim jacket, his face etched deep with lines and a gray beard framing his jaw. "You came alone," he said, his voice rough like gravel. Naomi nodded, gripping her phone like a lifeline. "You're Raymond Pierce?" He nodded once, glancing around the yard like every shadow hid a threat. Didn't think anybody still cared what happened. Thought everybody forgot. "I'm trying to tell the truth," Naomi said carefully, "about Earl Carter. About those women." His eyes darkened, and when he spoke, his words were low and jagged, like they'd been tearing at him for years. "Earl didn't just pick up women," he said. "He hunted them. And he wasn't alone." Naomi's breath caught. "What do you mean, not alone?" Raymond's jaw clenched. "Deacons, businessmen, folks with money and power. They'd bring girls to Magnolia House. Parties, they called them. Except most of them girls never went home." Naomi's stomach lurched. "You saw this happen?" "I drove the trucks," he said flatly. "Picked them up on the highways. Brought em to Earl. After a while, I couldn't live with it. Told the sheriff. Next thing I know, charges dropped, case sealed, and they come after me. I barely made it out alive." Naomi's mind spun, images flashing those photos, those smiles. Not random disappearances. Systematic, organized. Raymond leaned in, his eyes fierce under the floodlight. "You need to leave this alone, Miss Cole. These men, they ain't ghosts. They're breathing, and they'll bury you same as those girls." Before Naomi could respond, a sound split the night, a sharp crack, echoing like thunder. Raymond staggered. For a heartbeat, Naomi thought he tripped. Then she saw the dark balloon spreading across his chest. "Run," he rasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "Run." Another shot rang out, shattering metal behind her. Naomi spun, heart in her throat, and bolted between the trailers as headlights blazed to life across the yard. She ran until her lungs burned, the world tilting, gunfire cracking in the dark. And when she dove through the fence and into the wild weeds, one truth burned hotter than the fear clawing at her chest. This wasn't a story anymore. It was a war. Naomi didn't stop running until the floodlights were specks behind her and the night swallowed the roar of the gunshots. Her breath tore through her chest in ragged bursts as she crashed through a thicket of weeds, her palms raw from clawing at the chain-link fence. She stumbled toward her car, parked half-hidden under the drooping shadow of a pine tree. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the keys twice before the engine roared to life. Gravel spat from under her tires as she sped away, headlights carving a path through the darkness. The taste of metal coated her tongue. Her heart jackhammered, not from the run, but from the image she couldn't shake. Raymond Pierce slumping to the ground, blood blooming like a red flower across his denim jacket, his last word echoing in her skull. Run. And she had. God help her, she ran. Naomi gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles whitened. In the dim glow of the dash, she saw the smear of blood on her forearm, Raymond's blood. She wanted to scrub it off, to scrub the whole night from her skin. But his voice stayed ragged and urgent. "They ain't ghosts. They're breathing. They'll bury you same as those girls." She drove in silence for an hour, every passing headlight making her flinch. Twice she thought she saw the glint of an SUV in the mirror, but each time it melted into the night. Back at the motel, she parked behind the building, away from the streetlight. The room smelled like fear. When she opened the door, her fear, thick and sour, mingling with the faint trace of cologne left by whoever had torn it apart earlier. She stripped off her blood-stained shirt and shoved it in a trash bag, washing her arms in the sink until the water ran pink and clear. When she looked up, her reflection stared back with hollow eyes. "This is insane," she whispered. Her voice cracked, splintering in the silence. She sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands, until something hard pressed against her hip her notebook. She pulled it out, flipping to the last page she'd written. Raymond Pierce. Truck yard. He wasn't alone. Naomi lifted her gaze to the duffel bag on the chair, the one she hadn't checked since before the meeting. Heart pounding, she dumped its contents onto the bed. Her laptop, charger, wallet, and something she didn't pack. A folded piece of paper. Naomi froze. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Scrawled in shaky ink were 5 words. Locker 12, Jackson Bus Depot. Her stomach twisted. Had Raymond slipped this in before the shots? If so, it meant he'd left her something important enough to die for. She checked the clock. 12:47 a.m. Too late to make the trip tonight. Too risky after what happened. She slid the note into her back pocket and powered up her laptop instead. If Raymond was telling the truth, this wasn't just about Earl Carter. This was organized moneyed men using Magnolia House as a hunting ground. She dug into public records, searching for the original Magnolia House board members. Names popped up like ghosts. Walter Sims, deacon, a banker, a judge, all men with spotless reputations. All men who, according to property filings, had donated generously to Earl's businesses. Naomi's chest tightened as dots connected in her head. This wasn't a predator working alone. It was a ring. A ring that had survived Earl's death and thrived in silence. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from her editor. "Piece on Magnolia House, where are we? Need draft by Friday." She stared at the screen, bitter laughter bubbling in her throat. A draft? She had bodies, bullets, blood drying on the asphalt. She typed back one word. Delayed. Before she could shut the laptop, a soft scrape froze her breath. From the window. Naomi turned slowly, her pulse hammering in her ears. The curtain stirred the faintest ripple. She moved closer, her steps soundless on the thin carpet. Inch by inch, she eased the curtain aside. Empty. Just the lot, silvered in moonlight. She exhaled, shaky, and let the curtain fall, then froze again. On the glass, in bold, foggy letters, was a single word, written from outside. Tick. Her blood iced over. She backed away, phone clutched like a weapon, her ears straining for any sound beyond the pounding in her skull. Outside, the night hummed low and endless. Somewhere in the dark, they were watching, waiting, and Naomi knew what that word meant. Tick, as in a clock, as in time running out. By dawn, Naomi's nerves were raw. She had dozed for maybe 20 minutes, boots still on, the motel chair braced under the door handle like a flimsy prayer. Every creak outside had her bolting upright, every shadow on the wall stretching long like fingers reaching for her. The word on the glass burned in her mind. T-I-C-K. Time was running out. She didn't wait for the sun to climb high. By 6:30 a.m., she was on the road, the note from Raymond tucked in her pocket, like a map to salvation or damnation. The Jackson Bus Depot looked like every other transit station she'd ever seen. Gray walls, cracked linoleum floors, the stale scent of coffee and exhaust hanging in the air. The morning crowd shuffled through, dragging suitcases, sipping from styrofoam cups. Nobody paid her any mind as she walked toward the wall of lockers at the far end. Her throat tightened when her eyes landed on it. 12. Rust streaked the metal. a fat lock dangling from its handle. She slipped the tiny key she'd found inside the note into the lock. It clicked open with a sound that made her skin prickle. The door swung wide. Inside was a manila envelope, thick and worn, soft at the edges. Naomi's heart jackhammered as she pulled it out and slid onto a nearby bench, her back to the wall. The first thing inside was a stack of Polaroids. She flipped through them, her stomach lurching. The women from the lockbox were there, but these were posed smiles by shiny cars. These were dark, grainy shots. Women crying, bound, in rooms Naomi recognized instantly. Magnolia House bedrooms. Her hands shook as she turned the photos faster, bile rising in her throat. The last image stopped her cold. It was a man's hand, gripping a woman's chin. The face was obscured, but the ring on his finger gleamed in the flash. Gold, etched with a small cross. Naomi's mind raced back to yesterday. Deacon Walter Sims, standing under stained glass, his hands folded in prayer. That ring had glinted under the church lights. "Oh my God," she whispered, voice breaking. She shoved the Polaroids back and pulled out the next item. A small cassette tape, its label faded but legible. Needing April 1987. Her breath caught. She had no player to listen to it now, but she didn't need to guess what it held. Evidence. Maybe enough to burn the whole rotten tree down. At the bottom of the envelope was one last thing. A folded sheet of paper covered in Raymond's jagged handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm dead. These men ain't just killers. They're kings in this county. Judges, bankers, preachers, they call it the circle. And Evelyn knew. She kept their secrets, 'cause they owned everything, her house, her life, her soul. But there's one name that matters most. The one who cleaned it all when Earl died. Look to who's smiling in every picture. That's the one pulling the strings now." Naomi read it twice, her chest constricting. Look to who's smiling in every picture. She thought back to the gala photo she found, the edges blurred but clear enough to see a familiar curve of lips at the center of every frame. Not Sims, not the banker. Someone closer. Her phone buzzed, making her jolt. She snatched it up, heart in her throat. A text from an unknown number. "Hope you're ready to die for that envelope." Her pulse slammed. Naomi stuffed the evidence back inside, scanning the depot. A man in a ball cap leaned against a column near the ticket desk. Another figure sat on a bench by the exit, his gaze low, but his posture too still. They were here. Naomi rose, the envelope gripped tight under her jacket, and walked fast toward the restroom. The sound of boots followed, soft but steady. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed harsh overhead. She locked herself in a stall, heart pounding as footsteps entered the tiled space. 2 sets, heavy. A voice spoke, low and cold. "Come on out, Miss Cole. Time's up." Naomi clamped a hand over her mouth, breath shallow, eyes flicking to the small, grimy window above the toilet. Big enough to squeeze through, maybe. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in like a weight. Then the stall door shook violently. Once, twice, a fist pounding hard enough to rattle the lock. Naomi scrambled onto the toilet seat, hoisting herself toward the window as a boot slammed into the door with a thunderous crack. Another kick. The lock gave. Naomi gritted her teeth, shoved her shoulders through the tight frame, and tumbled into the alley outside just as the door burst open behind her. She hit the ground hard, the envelope clutched to her chest, and ran lungs burning, shoes slapping against broken pavement. Behind her, voices cursed. Ahead, the city stretched wide, but Naomi didn't feel free. She felt the noose tightening, because now she had proof. And proof was a death sentence in Colfax County. Naomi drove with shaking hands and eyes that kept flicking to the rearview mirror. Every car behind her felt like a threat, Every set of headlights a warning. She didn't stop until she was 50 miles out, pulling into an abandoned gas station swallowed by weeds. Her breath rattled as she killed the engine and grabbed the envelope. The Polaroids, the note those were enough to burn reputations to ash. But the cassette tape? That was the kill shot. She dug her old microcassette recorder from her bag, a relic she carried for interviews in places where phones weren't welcome. Her thumb hovered over the play button, her pulse thrumming like a war drum. Click. A hiss of static filled the car. Then voices. Male. Laughter undercut with something darker. Earl, you outdid yourself this time. That little thing? Barely 20. Don't matter. She won't talk when we're done. None of 'em ever do. A ripple of laughter followed. Naomi's stomach knotted so tight she thought she'd choke. The tape crackled as another voice, smooth, commanding, cut through. Gentlemen, keep it quiet. We got eyes everywhere now. One slip, and everything we built falls apart. Naomi froze. That voice, it wasn't Earl Carter. She'd never heard Earl speak, but every article painted him as loud, brash. This voice was calm, measured, a man used to being obeyed, and it was familiar. She replayed it twice, her mind racing back through every conversation since she set foot in Colfax. And it hit her like a freight train. Deacon Walter Sims. The church pillar who smiled like a saint. The man warning her about sins disappearing. He wasn't covering for Earl. He was running the damn show. Her hands trembled so hard the tape nearly slipped. The circle wasn't Earl's legacy. It was Sims' kingdom. And Evelyn? She hadn't just kept quiet. She'd played housekeeper to their nightmares for decades. Naomi's stomach churned. She jammed the tape back into the envelope and started the engine, tires spitting gravel as she tore back onto the highway. She had proof now. Enough to bury Sims and every man in his circle. But who could she trust? The sheriff? A judge? They were probably in on it. Her phone buzzed, making her jolt so hard she almost swerved. A text, no number. Just words that made her blood run cold. Church tonight. Come alone. Or your mother meets God before you do. Naomi's breath hitched. Her mother. Back in Memphis. She hadn't told a soul about her. How did they? Her vision blurred, rage and terror colliding in her chest. They wanted to break her, corner her, and now they had leverage. She gripped the wheel so tight her nails bit her palms. If she didn't show, her mother was dead. If she did, she might not make it out alive. A storm brewed on the horizon, clouds boiling black against the sinking sun. Naomi drove straight toward it, the road stretching like a dark ribbon into hell. When she passed the cracked wooden sign for Magnolia Baptist, lightning split the sky. The steeple loomed ahead, its white paint ghostly under the brewing night. The parking lot was empty, except for one car. A silver Lincoln. Sims' car. Naomi killed the engine, slid the envelope under her jacket, and stepped into the wind. The air smelled of rain and old secrets. Inside, the church was silent, shadows spilling like ink across the pews. Candles flickered near the altar, their flames bending in the draught. And then footsteps, slow, deliberate. Deacon Sims emerged from the gloom, his silver hair gleaming like a halo, his hands folded over his stomach. The same hands from the photo, the same ring glinting in the candlelight. "Miss Cole," he said, his voice smooth as silk over glass. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Naomi swallowed hard, her throat dry as bone. "Where's my mother?" Sims' smile widened, cold and cruel, alive, for now. "Whether she stays that way depends on you." Lightning flashed, painting the stained glass in bloody light. Naomi's fingers brushed the envelope under her jacket like a lifeline. She had walked straight into the lion's den, and the lion was smiling. Rain lashed the church windows, the storm pounding like fists on stained glass as Naomi faced Walter Sims across the dim sanctuary. His shadow stretched long across the aisle, a cross rising behind him like a silent judge. "You want to sit?" Sims asked, gesturing toward the front pew as if they were old friends. "No? Shame. It's a holy place, Miss Cole. But then, you've never been much for holy things, have you?" Naomi kept her voice steady, though her pulse thundered. "You killed those women." His smile didn't falter. "Killed? No. We elevated them. Gave them purpose before God took them home." He stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking on the wood. "But I suppose you wouldn't understand grace. You call that grace?" Her words spat like acid, binding them, parading them like trophies. "You ran a slaughterhouse in God's name." Sims' eyes gleamed, cold and triumphant. "Earl started the party. I perfected it. And Evelyn? She knew her role. We all did. Order. Miss Cole, that's what we built. In a world that wants to erase us, we took what we needed to survive." "You didn't survive," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "You fed on the weak. You're not saints. You're monsters." Sims' expression hardened. "Careful. Words like that will cost you more than your life." Lightning strobed across his face, revealing the gun now dangling casually in his hand. The barrel gleamed like a dark promise. "Your mother's safe for now," Sims said smoothly. "All you have to do is hand me what you found. The photos, the tape, everything." Naomi's fingers brushed the envelope under her jacket, slick with sweat. Her mind raced. If she gave him the evidence, she'd be condemning 8 women to silence forever. But if she didn't, her mother would pay the price. "You're lying," she whispered, though part of her prayed she was wrong. Sims smiled thinly. "Call her, then." He tossed a phone at her feet. Naomi bent slowly, dialing with trembling hands. The line clicked, and then her mother's voice, thin and terrified, spilled through the static. "Naomi? Baby?" Naomi's breath fractured. "Mama, I'm here." "Are you—" The line went dead. Sims plucked the phone from her hand, his smirk sharp as broken glass. "Tick-tock," he murmured. Something inside Naomi snapped. Fear burned away, leaving steel. Her gaze flicked past Sims to the altar steps, where a brass candlestick glinted in the candlelight. He stepped closer, gun steady. "Choose, Miss Cole." Naomi let her shoulders sag, feigning surrender as her hand slid inside her jacket. She pulled the envelope free, holding it out like an offering. Sims reached just as she swung the candlestick in a savage arc. The metal connected with a sickening crack. Sims' gun went off, the shot blasting through the ceiling as he crumpled to the floor, blood pooling around his head. Naomi staggered back, chest heaving, the candlestick clanging to the wood. For a moment, the only sound was the storm howling through the rafters. Then footsteps, heavy, fast. Naomi whirled as 2 men in dark suits barreled down the aisle. Her body moved before her brain did, grabbing Sims' gun, raising it with trembling hands. "Back up," she screamed, voice raw. "I'll shoot." They froze, trading glances. Then, slowly, they raised their hands and backed toward the door. Naomi didn't wait to see if they stayed gone. She bolted through the side exit into the storm, rain pelting her like stones, her hair plastered to her face. She ran until the church was a ghost behind her, and her lungs burned for air. 2 weeks later, the newsroom smelled of ink and coffee as Naomi sat at her desk, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen. Headline: "The Circle. Secrets Buried in Colfax County." The article below was a graveyard of horrors photos of the women. Excerpts from the tape, names that once commanded power, now synonymous with rot. The FBI had the evidence. Sims was dead. 2 men arrested. The others scattering like roaches under light. Naomi should have felt triumph. Instead, all she felt was hollow. Her mother was safe, But Naomi hadn't told her everything. How close death came. How blood still clung to her hands in ways soap couldn't reach. She hit save, closed the file, and glanced at the Polaroid tacked to her board. The first woman from the lockbox, smiling in front of that red Chevy. Naomi whispered to her, voice barely audible over the newsroom hum. "They'll never forget you now." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "We're not done." Naomi stared at it, the hum of the city pressing against the glass. Outside, storm clouds rolled in again, dark and endless. And deep down, she knew this wasn't the last secret Magnolia House would bleed. What you just heard wasn't the full story. It was the part someone tried to bury. The part that didn't fit the headline. The part where a person, not a suspect, was lost in the process. This case showed us what happens when the system moves too fast, or not at all. When suspicion weighs more than truth. When justice shows up late or never. But here's the thing. If these stories don't leave us asking questions, they'll keep repeating with different names. So if this one meant something to you, don't just move on. Talk about it. Question it. Pass it on. Because silence protects the wrong side of history. And sometimes the only thing standing between truth and erasure is someone who chooses to care. Like, share, comment. Let the next chapter begin with awareness, not regret.